Today on Light of the Word with Pastor Ray.
Jesus comes that we might have life and that more abundant, the fullness of life. But the devil comes, he wants to block and throw rubbish into these wells and stop the flow. And, we're looking at America divided and the blockage of these things, criticality, social gospels, things that just don't matter, and people start moving from the well, the living water.
Open your heart to us, Lord, so we can know your word. We come before you, Jesus. Speak to our hearts as we discover your love for us. How wide, how deep, how far. Pour into us so we can learn to follow. One surrender at a time. You have made the way for us to know you, a path that's straight and right. By the light of the word.
Jesus is often referred to as the living water. In today's message, Pastor Ray teaches about Isaac and the digging of wells wherever he settled. Isaac's enemies would throw dirt and debris into the well because cutting off the water source can cripple an entire community. What does your water source look like? Is your spiritual well deep, crystal clear, and full of living water? If your well is getting clogged, tainted, or full of garbage, maybe it's time to make some difficult life changes. Well, let's join Pastor Ray in the book of Genesis chapter 25 as he continues his message, The Fullness of Days.
Ishmael, Isaac, how far Ishmael was separated from Isaac up to this point. And and I see this through life here. People go decades without talking to one another, separations. Someone's going to die. Should the Lord tarry, we will see death. We'll see death around us. Loved ones dying unexpectedly. And it's just a heartbreaking place that it took death to bring a family back together. And sometimes the one who died can no longer speak and share and say, I wish we would have just let that go. I wish we could have just overlooked those things. Was it really that important what we battled over? There's going to be some things that are non-negotiable. We know that. There's going to be some things that, according to the word and these type of things, we have to take our position. It's going to cause a division. But, I just say, if at all possible, as the Hebrew says, live peaceably one with another. And may it not take death for us to finally see somebody all these years later. It's heartbreaking. Verse 11, and it came to pass after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac dwelt at Beer-lahai. And so here they go. God's burying his workmen. But the beauty of it is the work goes on. Abraham invested in Isaac, and Isaac stayed the course. Isaac is 40 when he marries, 60 when he has children. He believed what was spoken to him. Dad said this, I believed it, and so I stayed with this, even when Rebecca, his wife, was barren for 20 years. And so he passes, and you know what, dads, moms too, we must push this ministry down to our children. We must push, if you would, where the fullness of joy is. And we'll see that with Ishmael, and so I'll speak it when I get there. We talk about everywhere we see Abraham, what was he doing? Pitching tents and building altars, every now and then planting a tree. And Isaac is interesting, as we'll study him for the next several chapters, is we keep seeing him at wells. We first saw him, or we last saw him, right, when Rebecca was being brought at the end of chapter 24 at the well, Beer-lahai. Do you remember that well? Genesis chapter 16. It's where God met Hagar with child. thinking it was all over. What's next for me? And God met her, and she named this well, the God who sees me. I find it interesting, Hagar with child and the word spoken, the God who sees me. And here we'll start transitioning into Rebecca's barrenness. And God shows up and God sees mothers. He sees their barrenness. He sees their heart's desire. And he shows up. And the first time we read a name of God given in all the scriptures is to a brokenhearted mother who's been cast out. Now she's a single mother. Just beautiful pictures of the Lord's great sweetness. You know what's interesting to me, church, especially the days that we live in? We're going to read him unblocking wells. It's going to become like half of his life. Unblocking, clearing the stoppage of the wells that were blocked up by the Philistines. You know, and I find that so interesting is Isaac will be a father himself to nations. And, you know, and I think we're living in a time, especially in America, you know, Europe and the rest, they're on their way down. But, you know, we had spiritual fathers who dug wells for America. Finney, Moody, Whitfield, Chuck Smith. They dug wells, and rivers of living water flowed through this country. Here we sit studying the word chapter by chapter, verse by verse, because a man dug a well, Pastor Chuck Smith. That well opened up and we could see the richness of just going verse by verse. Maybe it's not as flashy and entertaining as you can make certain topical messages, but the richness and the depth. Just think how far we've come in 25 chapters and what God's done in our lives. But we're living in a time that the evil one in his ways, John 10:10, he's come to steal, kill, and destroy. What Jesus comes, that we might have life and that more abundant, the fullness of life. But the devil comes, he wants to block and throw rubbish into these wells and stop the flow. And, you know, we're looking at America divided and the blockage of these things. Criticality, social gospels, things that just don't matter, and people start moving from the well of the living water, John 10. But hey, you know what, parent? If there's any blockage in the wells of your family, your marriage, you got to unblock that well. You got to come and you got to dig into it, and you got to find yourself of just let this rivers of living water flow. I'm not going to let the foolishness of the world, and now with all this social media and the likes, we got to unblock these wells. And I speak of the work goes on, and I remember I hadn't been back to the West Coast in, a decade. And I was back at the West Coast after a decade. And I remember sitting in the hotel. The next day I was going to Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa for the first time in 10 years. Pastor Chuck. And then the word came to me, a friend, he says, Pastor Chuck just passed away. And I can tell you what, it was like an immediate impression upon my heart was, but the work doesn't stop. And it was like a word from the Lord, who will carry this on? And I said, I know I will. And I know there will be plenty of other men and women who will. And the work passed down and the work continues on, but we can never let the wells get blocked up. Well, verse 12 through 16. Now this is the genealogy of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's maidservant, bore to Abraham. And these were the names of the sons of Ishmael, by their names, according to their genealogies, the firstborn of Ishmael. And there's this list starting in verse 13, 14, 15. Verse 16 says, these were the sons of Ishmael, and these were their names by their towns and their settlement. Catch that. 12 princes, according to their nations. Ishmael had power and wealth. His sons went on to become princes, making great nations themselves, just as the Lord said they would. But here we see These were the years of the life of Ishmael, 137. Isaac's going to live to 180, Abraham to 175. And he breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people. That word die there, fell. I don't know if he fell in a battle, if he fell in an accident, or he just fell from a heart attack. But he dies at 137. They dwelt from Havilah as far as Shur, which is east of Egypt, and as you go towards Assyria, he died in the presence of all his brethren. Do you notice the difference? He doesn't die full. He dies. What does it profit a man that he gains the whole world, yet in the end lose his soul? Ishmael will be what it appears is he never did follow his father's faith. He will be used in the book of Galatians as a comparison of somebody who thought a different way to the presence of the Lord. A works. He's a representation of the law that cannot save us, whereas Isaac in Galatians 4 is the picture of grace, only what God can do. And here's the thing, as we study today's world around us, Ishmael would be this, what we read here in Galatians 4, his religion through his ways, the work. And then 1,400 years ago, someone who says that he was a direct descendant of Ishmael, and his name is Muhammad. Muhammad, and the writing of the Quran is that Ishmael and Hagar ended up in Mecca there, the holiest site of Islam, and that it wasn't Isaac that Abraham took to Mount Moriah, it was Ishmael that was the one, and therefore the promise. And now you can start seeing how all this weaves together into this battle over this little piece of land. They got more than enough land to live and more than enough oil to prosper. Why do you care about Jerusalem? Well, because the devil cares about Jerusalem, and here's the biggest thing. If you want to know Jesus, you got to go to Jerusalem. The greatest man who ever walked this earth never left Israel. His whole life. If you would have thought world missions, there's the one who would do it. He never left Israel, and I believe the point is, because if you want to know him, you got to go to Israel. Read this book of his birth, his life, his miracles, his teaching, his death, his burial. Why did he die on the cross? His resurrection, and then his ascension. And then again, he will return again to that very place that he ascended. You want to know Jesus, you got to go to Israel, and so the devil doesn't want anybody to remember what happened in Israel 2,000 years ago. But here in Islam is Muhammad, said born in Mecca, direct descendant to Ishmael, and that stone there in Mecca that's in that cube, the Kaaba, is the most holy stone because in their form of religion, that black stone was once white. And if you kissed the stone, your sin would transfer, and your blackness of your sin would transfer to that stone. But if you go to the Temple Mount there in Jerusalem, there's the Dome of the Rock. And it was there that Muhammad would say, I was in Mecca. In the dream, I was translated to Jerusalem, to that Dome of the Rock. And from there, I was taken up into heaven in a vision. Bodily. And there I met and I spoke with Moses, Abraham, and Jesus. And I was given the order for Islam, and specifically, very much so, the 5 prayers for today. Do these 5 prayers, do these things, and you'll be right with the Lord. And you can just see how this just continues on, and the battles and the resistance that comes back, and he comes back. You know, when Muhammad put if you would, started Islam, submitted to God is what it means to be a Muslim, that he thought he would merge Judaism and Christianity. And he thought he thought, if you would, slam dunk, I'm going to tell people it's one religion, this is the religion. But the Judaizers who hadn't received Jesus 600 days, they didn't want nothing to do it. No way. Christianity is like, absolutely not. That's not the way to salvation. And when he, after 2-3 years of thinking he was going to unite the religions, found out how far he divided from the religions, you start reading his writings and you'll start seeing the back end of them, the bitter resentment and war calling to the Jews and the Christians. It's unmistakable. It's undeniable. Why do I teach it? Because we got to teach it. The world doesn't want to teach it. This isn't about diplomatic or even economic. It is an ideology that goes back 1,400 years that was steeped from a lie straight from the pit of hell, because Muhammad did not go to heaven and Jesus did not give him something different from this word of God. And that's why the world is what the world is. When you read the newspaper, we do prophecy updates. That is why the world is the way that it is. Now we come to the sons of Isaac, Jacob and Esau. This is the genealogy of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham begot Isaac. Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah as wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Paddan Aram, the sister of Laban, the Syrian. We're going to get to meet more of him coming up. Verse 21, now Isaac pleaded with the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his plea, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. Hey, husbands, how much are you praying for your wife? Here's the beautiful example, a man who pleads for his wife. Verse 22, but the children struggled together within her, and she said, if all is well, why am I like this? I don't tell if she said that to Isaac, or because it says next, so she went to inquire of the Lord, because that would be a hard question for any husband. If all is well, why am I like this? But now notice her, she goes to the Lord. So here's the thing, hey wives, there's only certain things the Lord can answer for you that your husband will never be able to. He's limited as any man is. And so here she says, and here in verse 23, and the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 people shall be separated from your body, one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. And we're going to build on these in the weeks to come. That's why I'm not worried about not having a deep dive right now, but there's a war going on. Do you notice something here? Totally dismiss this cultural lie of that there isn't a sanctity of life. The Lord recognized these 2 in the womb. They're not even born yet, because it's going to say in verse 24, so when her days were full. There's no at 5 weeks or when the breath was. The Lord recognizes these 2 as souls. Not only did he recognize them as individuals and who they would be, but he could even recognize that there will be nations, speaking of their whole lineage. And God can see one child and sees their whole lineage all the way through all of their reproduction. And so this is one that clearly yells out the sanctity of life. So the 2 nations, it's the battle in Galatians and Romans that we read about of these 2 boys. Verse 24 and 26, we're going to get their description. So when her days were fulfilled for her to give birth, indeed there were twins in the womb. And the first came out red. He was like a hairy garment all over, so they called his name Esau, meaning red and hairy. Verse 26, afterward his brother came out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. So Jacob gets his name heel catcher, which means to trip up. That's what the point is. He wants to trip up, and we're going to read that through the life of Jacob, his conniving and scheming. But there's going to be this difference between the 2 of them. Verse 27, important as we build on this. So the boys grew, and Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a mild man, dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. You hear the thing that Isaac's a mama boy, helping around the kitchen. That's what mild means. Actually, when you read this word, it's also used in Job chapter 1 as the reference to Job. The Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is none like him on earth, a blameless, that's the word in Hebrew, tam, an upright man, as it blends together, one who fears God and shuns evil. He was diligent. He was disciplined. He was a seeker or a helper of others. He's not this weak namby-pamby. He's not the hunter. And the point about that is, it's okay. It's okay. One doesn't have to be the mighty man and the other, it's okay to be whatever God makes you out to be. But what we're going to read, and I'll just summarize as we close out this, is Jacob will care about the spiritual things. Esau will have no care about anything spiritual. God will clearly call that out, and we can say when we get into Romans, Malachi chapter 1, Jacob I loved, Esau I hated. And we go, is that what the Lord would say? It's a Hebrew idiom of strong comparison. And he's strongly comparing the things of what he loves and what is the great disdain of what Esau did. And let's just read through it. He will reject the birthright. The birthright of the oldest was to become the spiritual leader when your father died. And Esau doesn't want nothing to do with it. He could care less about it. He just wants the moment and the time now. Verse 28 through 34. And Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Now Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. And Esau said to Jacob, please feed me with the same red stew, for I am weary. Therefore his name was called Edom, which back to red. But Jacob said, sell me your birthright as of this day. And Esau said, look, I'm about to die, so what is this birthright to me? Hey, whether it's a pot of stew or whether it's a career path or whether it's some other idol, this is the most important things. I don't care about the spiritual things today. Maybe someday I will, but today all I care is about my flesh, myself, my satisfaction. That's what Esau is. And Jacob said, swear to me as of this day. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils. Then he ate and drank, arose, and he went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. And the last verse I close with is Hebrews chapter 12. As it's speaking, pursue peace with all people and holiness, without which no one will see the Lord. Looking carefully, lest anyone fall short of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up cause trouble, and by this many become defiled, lest there be any fornicator or profane person like Esau, who for one morsel of food sold his birthright. For you know that afterward, when he wanted to inherit the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no place for repentance, though he sought it diligently with tears. And that's another study in itself. But you know what profane means? It means to be outside the temple. And there's the perfect picture that Esau was outside. He didn't care about the temple of the Lord. He didn't care about these things of the Lord.
You have made the way for us to know you, a path that's straight and right.
This is Light of the Word, and we're in the book of Genesis. There's a reason why we should start at the very beginning. So much formative information is written and communicated in the Bible based on Genesis. God sets the stage, describing who He is, what His purposes are for mankind, and the desperate need of a Savior to rescue man from his own demise. From the days of creation through the Eden story to the story of Noah and the flood, it's rich with color as well as providing life lessons to learn. Then you get into the saga of Abraham's lineage. Many high points are brought to your attention, as well as several areas where each person fell short in his own way. But God doesn't value people based on perfection. He cares most about a person's heart and what's done after falling down. Do you stay in the dirt and mud, scrounging to find a way out on your own? Or do you reach out to God for His help and guidance? This idea becomes evident throughout Genesis as various people and groups sought after God, and some ran the other way. We trust that what you're hearing about in the book of Genesis is having a profound impact on your life and drawing you closer to Him. To gain more teaching insights, go to lightoftheword.info. That's all for today from Light of the Word, illuminating the heart of God.
You have made